Water sample collection mistakes, Part 2. Not planning your sample collection time.
Just like collecting your sample from the right location can make all the difference in the world about the water quality report you get back, it also matters when you collect your water quality sample. If you collect a water quality sample first thing in the morning, you're going to get a greater impact from the metals and the potential leaching from the pipes. This is because the water has been sitting in contact with those pipes overnight. This is called first draw sampling. On the other extreme, you can let the water run for 5-10 minutes down the sink, down the drain, and then collect your sample. And at that point, you know your sample is coming from the source. It has not spent time sitting in the pipes overnight. You're getting kind of a fresher or more raw sample from the source, whether that's the well or the city water line that is distributing water to your home. So there's a whole spectrum of options in between first draw and fully fleshed samples. Make sure you pay attention to which kind of sample you want. You can talk to our support team anytime and ask questions about what the different samples imply. We have some great blog resources to go in much more detail about the differences between first draw and fully fleshed samples. But think of it this way, what do you care most about seeing in your results? Do you want to see that worst case scenario of heavy metals in your water from old plumbing? Well, then do a first draw. If you want to see the nature of the water quality source itself, whether the well water or city water from the distribution system, consider doing a fully flush draw and letting the water run for a while first. Remember, the water that goes into your container is the water that's going to get tested. So make sure you're putting the water into that container that you think best represents your problem or best represents the kind of water quality you're consuming on a daily basis.
Sampling immediately after treatment installation.
So you build a new well or you install a new water filtration system at the home and you're super excited to see how well it's working, and you take a sample right away from that new system or that new filtration device that you've bought, and you send it in, thinking you're going to see the best drinking water quality ever. Unfortunately not. Unfortunately, you're going to want to give any new installation, whether that's the well itself, plumbing, or a new filtration system you've installed at the home or on the premises, you're going to want to give that system a couple of weeks to really settle in and to find equilibrium with the water before really pushing it and seeing what it can do. So you wait a couple weeks, then collect the sample, then send it in for lab testing. If you don't do this and you just collect the first sample that comes out of the pitcher you bought or the first sample that comes out of the well that you just built or dug into the ground in the backyard, unfortunately, there's just a lot of weird stuff that happens during that construction process or weird kind of chemistry that takes place when you have a brand new filter or a brand new membrane. And you really want to see what happens once that brand new wears off, right? So your first samples, first draw right after installing something new are not going to be representative of how this thing really functions over time. So you're much better off waiting week or two, let the equilibrium set in between the water and this new hardware, and then collect the sample. Then what you'll see is a more accurate portrayal of the effectiveness or not effectiveness of whatever you've just done, whether it's the new well or a new filtration system. If you have any questions about this, I know it can be a little complicated and I know it can be sometimes feeling very urgent to collect a sample to see if something works. Reach out to our team. I'm more than happy to give you some advice on how and where and when to collect a sample if you've just installed something new.
Waiting too long to ship your water sample.
Before you even collect your sample, you want to look at your day ahead and figure out when you're going to bring that sample to FedEx, when you're going to drop that sample off at the laboratory. The reason this is so important is you do not want to collect your samples and have them sitting around waiting. You want to get those samples to the laboratory as quickly as possible, and for every different test kit, that's going to be a different amount of time. Some of these samples need to be rushed to the lab the same day, others can wait a couple days or a couple weeks. But to always be safest, to always make sure your sample is best represented by the time it gets to the laboratory, you want to get it there as quickly as possible. So read the instructions, plan ahead, and make sure to collect your samples on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Try to avoid holidays. Try to do what you can to avoid something like a big storm or a vacation. You really want to make sure that your samples are taking a pretty basic run-of-the-mill day day trip to the laboratory. So if it's collected on a Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, it's going to arrive 1 or 2 days later, and that's great. If you collect your sample on a Friday and you drop it off at the post office or FedEx at 5 p.m., it might not arrive till Tuesday or Wednesday. Now, that may not be the end of the world. Depends on the test kit you're sending in. But it's always best to minimize the amount of time between the sample being collected and the sample arriving at the laboratory.
Using your tap before you collect your sample.
Choosing when to collect your sample is absolutely vital to making sure that your water quality report represents your actual water quality. I'll give you some examples here. So if you collect your water quality sample directly after bathing a pet or an infant in a small sink or in a bathtub, there's going to be an impact of the bacteria, of the soaps, of the other chemicals in that water on the sample collected, because it's going to potentially touch the faucet tip and get into your sample jar. Another common circumstance is testing your water first thing in the morning. If you collect a sample first thing in the morning and nobody has used that tap at all, you're getting what's called a first draw sample. It's going to be a sample that represents the often worst case scenario for things like lead and heavy metals that might be in the plumbing of your home. This is because overnight, the water was sitting and touching those pipes for hours on end. Now, if you run that tap for 30 minutes that morning because you are doing dishes or making breakfast, by the time you collect your sample 30, 45 minutes later, your water quality is no longer going to be a first draw sample. It's going to have been impacted by the activities you took at that tap. So before you collect any sample whatsoever, you want to think about what are you doing at that tap before you collect that sample, and thinking about whether that might be impacting the sample itself. If you have any questions about this sort of thing, because it can get very nuanced, definitely refer to your instructions inside of your test kit, or else reach out to us and the support team will help you make the right decision about when to collect your sample.
Water flow rate while collecting your sample.
If you're collecting a water quality sample with the hope of capturing some kind of a volatile substance, something that might evaporate from the water, and this is common for testing that includes trihalomethanes and chlorine or VOCs from, let's say, nearby oil and gas concerns or industrial waste. If there are VOCs that are important to you in your sample, it is particularly important to collect your sample with water running slowly. If you blast open that faucet and fill up the bottle as quickly as possible, you're going to be exposing the sample, the water itself coming out of your tap, to a whole bunch of air, right? It's going to be mixing more air into that water, into the container. And what that's going to do is increase the opportunity for some of these gases to escape before they're tested at the laboratory. So when you're pulling a sample, and this is a good practice always, even if you're not particularly concerned about VOCs and volatile substances, always try to collect your sample on a very low flow. You want to reduce the mixing of the water that's coming from the tap and going into your bottle as much as possible. No matter how hard you try to be perfect, it is not uncommon to still make a mistake. We all make mistakes collecting water samples, and if you do find yourself making such a mistake and you don't know what to do next, I can tell you right here. Go onto our website, talk to the team on the live chat, or send us an email, and someone will get back to you very quickly and tell you exactly how best to remedy whatever problem has been created, or maybe it's not a problem at all. Either way, the team will guide you through any kind of mistake you think you've made and ensure that you're not sending in a sample that you'll regret later.
Stay tuned for part 3.